Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with like a pseudo collaboration with Audra at Home and Emily Han. I say pseudo because we haven't like teed up to release our videos at the exact same time or anything of that nature, but it was Audra's idea. She shared it with Emily and I. I know Emily has done this video as well. I don't think Audra's done it yet. I hope she does since it was her brainchild, but at any rate, here's my video on it, talking about palettes that should have / could have been great, but weren't. Honestly, I think the idea was just to pick one palette, but I've got 5. Yeah. Anyway, let's just dive straight into it. I'm going to link Emily and Audra down below. Please be sure to go and check them out if you haven't already. They are both lovely, hilarious, amazing people, and I know that you're gonna love them every bit as much as I do. So with that out of the way, let's just start right off. I'm not going to rank them in any particular order. I'm just going to grab and go. And the first one that I have in my hand is from Huda Beauty. And it's one of the neons. Neon orange, I'm guessing. But this is sort of like a pinky orange. And then the colors inside are orange shimmer, light orange, purple, peach. I'm guessing it's orange. But that, like, therein lies the problem. So they released, I believe it was 3 in this neon collection, and this was, from what I recall, the most neon of the bunch. There was a neon pink, neon orange, neon green, and the pink and the orange did look very similar. Pretty sure this is orange, but like when the light hits it, the packaging looks pink. So I don't know, I could check it out, but I don't care that much. It's bright. It's not really neon. And the other palettes were even less on the neon side. So it's one of those palettes that I wish that they had just gone for it. Like if you're going to put it in bright ass packaging, if you're gonna write neon in such big letters across the front, make it neon. It's not a bad palette, and really none of the palettes that I'm talking about are bad per se, or else I would have decluttered them by now. But they're just disappointing. They could have been what they promised, but they weren't. And this is certainly that right there. It should have been more neon, in my opinion. It is bright, I will give it that, but like these shades here, these are not neons. They are not neon whatsoever. Even this other shimmer shade here, like that is not a neon shadow. Are they pretty? Yes. Are they neon? Not so much. So this is one of those palettes that, while it is fun to play around with, it did disappoint me because it just didn't live up to what it said it was going to be. Okay, moving on. Next up is a palette that I did touch on briefly in my most recent video, and it is from Vizier. It's one of their Theory palettes in cashmere. It's a very neutral, basic palette. I really like the color story in here. One could argue it really doesn't have much of a color story, but I like it for everyday wear. I like it for going to work. I don't like it for actually using it. The dark shades, this is what I said in my previous video, this dark matte brown, so difficult to blend. It just grabs on, and then as I try to blend it, it just becomes very patchy. It kind of skips over itself. I find it very, very difficult to work with, and I find that the shimmery shadows are just lackluster and kind of meh for my own personal liking. So this is a palette that, while it does look like what would become a staple palette in my collection, because I can just grab it, shove it on my eyes, out the door I go. I don't have to put a ton of thought into it. I don't have to put a ton of work into it. I actually do have to put a lot of work into it, and for that reason, this one disappointed me. Next up is a bit of an older palette, but I resisted purchasing it for quite some time and then grabbed it when it was on sale sometime last year. I can't remember exactly when. And it's the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. And I lusted over this palette literally for years. I just thought it was the prettiest thing. I really wanted this. And then I bought it and I was disappointed. Obviously not disappointed enough to return it, although the longer I've had it, the more I've used it, the more I wish I had, because it's not great. Again, not a bad palette, but just not great. The yellow and the red leave me wanting more, and those are the ones that like excited me the most. The shimmer shadows are pretty, but there's really not a lot of diversity in the shades in this palette. So even like these mattes here, what? No, this, oh my God, I cannot do this and look in the viewfinder. This one, and this one here. This one is deeper, but they're all just sort of like variations on the same tone and without a lot of demarcation. This one definitely is darker, but like these two are very similar. These shimmers are similar. These shimmers on the other sides are similar. These browns don't really have much difference between the two of them. So this could have been a much more condensed palette with a much more condensed price point. I am so glad that I bought it on sale because this runs like $170 here in Canada, which is crazy. See, again, it's not a bad palette. It just, I wanted it for so long and I thought it was going to be such a dream to work with, and I was so excited about it, thought it would be so beautiful and that I'd use it all the time and blah, blah, blah. And it lives in a drawer and I very rarely bring it out because it just leaves me wanting more. All right, next up is from Melt Cosmetics, and I really thought that this could have been a fantastic palette, and it is the Smoke Sessions palette. The color story is just so nice. Like it was at the time that this was released, it was very unique. I think there are certainly more marijuana inspired makeup products out there, almost too much, I think we could argue. But like even as I'm holding it up, it is dusting everywhere. But the color story is beautiful. Like I really, really like this. I like that they have a ton of shimmer shadows to work with because I like shimmer shadows. And I just thought that this was going to be a fantastic palette. But they did something weird with these shimmer shadows, and you can probably even just see it just looking at it. Like they are so crumbly and they're so difficult to work with because they're just so delicate. You put a brush in it and it just kind of goes, and then you have to kind of repress it with your finger. So in order to use this, I find that I do have to use a finger, and I don't necessarily mind applying eyeshadow with a finger. I do it rather frequently, but when you only have two matte shades in here, like sometimes I want to line my lower lashes with like this shade or like the teal shade over here, and doing that with a finger, not very practical. But then also using a brush with this, the pan just kind of splits apart. I've seen people like with this palette where these shadows like puffed right out of the pan, and it just looks very alarming. Mine have not done that, but it is definitely a very, very delicate palette. The colors are beautiful, but it disappointed me because it is just so fussy and so finicky to work with. Like I'm afraid to use it because it just does one of those. It's a very technical term. You know what I mean though. So it could have been an amazing palette. Unfortunately, it's not. And that brings me to the last palette that I'm going to talk about in this video. And this was the palette that immediately came to mind as soon as Audra shared her idea with me. And that is the Textured Neutrals Volume 1 from Tati Beauty. I really did have high expectations for this palette simply because Tati has spent so many years reviewing countless palettes. She knows texture, she knows performance, she knows her way around an eyeshadow, and so I expected with that breadth of knowledge that there was going to be this like creme de la creme, like cream of the crop kind of eyeshadow palette. And then seeing the palette itself, it has very minimalistic packaging, yet when you open it up from a design perspective, it's got that great big mirror. It folds nice and flat all the way back, still fits in the hand. But what really sold me on this palette was the layout of it. This is a layout that I would love to see in every palette ever. It just makes sense to me. You have the certain texture or finish going across in different rows, and then obviously the color stories are grouped down this way. You have that gradient effect. Like it makes so much sense to me. So when I saw all of those things combined, my expectation for the actual performance of the shadows was like right up here. And again, I want to stress it's not a bad palette by any stretch. It's not bad. It's just that it could have been great and it's not. So I have a few complaints in here. First of all, there's a whole row of pressed glitters. They do perform well. You use a glitter glue, you pat them on with a finger, one of those silicone brushes, and you're fine. I just am not in love with pressed glitters because I find that they're just a pain in the ass to work with, honestly. They do look very pretty on the eye, so I can't fault them in that regard, but I am just not personally a fan of pressed glitters. I will use them on occasion, but I've never sat here and thought, you know what, I really wish more brands would come out with pressed glitters. I need more pressed glitters in my life. That has never entered my mind. The row that really disappoints me though is the metallic row. This one, the second from the top, straight across. And I've said this in a multitude of videos. For me personally, for metallic shadows, I want them to be foiled. I want them to be reflective and light catching. I want them to be impactful and really stand out on the eyes. And these do not. They just don't. They are soft, they're buttery, they blend out nicely, they apply nicely, but they're just more on the satin side than truly metallic, in my opinion. Again, not bad shadows, but disappointing for me and certainly not hitting that like great mark. Another disappointment for me in this palette is this shade right here. So this row are called the sequin finish. All of these shadows have little flecks of like micro glitter in them. That doesn't bother me. I really, really wanted this to look on my eye the way that it does in the pan. And then you can see on the finger that, yeah, you can see those little sparkly bits. And I think that's so pretty. But if you apply it with a brush and then blend it out, those little glittery bits just kind of disappear. There's still a few there. I mean, I just obviously wiped it off with my fingers, so it's a little bit more heavily applied than with a brush. But I found there is definitely a learning curve with this palette, and you can't just go in, pick up with a brush, swipe it on, and away you go. With that shade in particular, I find I really have to like pat it and pack it onto the lid so that it does have that like visible sparkle. But then you can't pack too much or else like that little bit of glitter starts to rain down and the matte binding shadow underneath it, if you will, doesn't really stay in place, and then you're just dealing with fallout everywhere. And it's difficult to work with. And I think that's my biggest complaint with this, is that I expected, coming from who it's coming from, I expected that this palette was going to be just like an eyeshadow lover's dream. And it is in some regards. Like the layout just does it for me. I love the layout. I love the color options, although I would argue that this shade Aura and one of these two shades should be a little bit different because it really does hit on the same tone. But like I like that you have the nice warm shades here. You've got nice neutral browns. You've got these purples over here. I do really like all of that. I really do like most of these matte shades. The black is a bit fussy and a bit difficult to work with. Not as bad as the dark brown in that Vizier palette, but you still have to like go really slowly with this. So overall, this is one of those palettes that I would not view necessarily as being beginner friendly. And I had such high expectations for it, and it just simply did not meet those expectations. I think when I did do a review on it, I think I overall gave it a like favorable review, and I still stand by that. I still think it's a good palette. It's just not a great palette. It's not a palette that I would say like everybody needs to have this in their collection. This is an absolute must-have palette. It's not. It's really not. I'd be curious to see what else she comes out with in terms of eyeshadows. This one is labeled Volume 1, which suggests to me there is an expectation, at least on the brand's part, that they're going to do a volume 2, or else they just would have called it Textured Neutrals, full stop. But I hope that we can maybe tone down the number of pressed glitters and amp up the foiled quality of the metallic shadows. There's my hopes. So there we have it. Again, I want to give a big thank you to Audra at home for making this suggestion to me. I have been on the struggle bus, my friends. I really, truly have. I feel like I'm starting to get through it. I feel like I'm sort of cresting the wave, the hump, the hill. I don't know. Turning the corner. What analogy works? I don't know. I'm feeling better. There it is. But yes, I have been on the struggle bus. So anytime somebody gives me suggestions, I really, truly do appreciate it. So, like I said, Emily has already done her video on this. I am going to link that in the description box down below. If Audra has done hers by the time I'm posting this, I will also link hers. If not, I will at the very least link her channel. Go and give them some love. Please let them know that I sent you and say hi from me. And I thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now. I'm making a mess all over my desk and laptop and fingers and other palette. Holy Christ. Hey, Melt, what the hell? It has like little flecks of gold micro glitter in it. It has little flecks of gold fuck. I need wipes, wipes, wipes. I need wipes, 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 wipes. I need wipes for my finger stripes.